Shalom everyone, and welcome to Parashat Terumah. I'm excited to be talking to you about this Parsha, but I have to admit when I was first asked about it, I was a little bit less excited to be talking about Terumah in particular. You know, Sefer Shemot is filled with these fascinating stories. The whole exodus from Egypt, coming to Har Sinai, entering a Berit with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these are all very exciting topics, and filled with lessons that we remember from when we were little. And then we come to Parashat Terumah and we start talking about building a Mishkan all of a sudden. And we're really just talking about it. We're not even building it yet. We might even wonder, why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu need a Mishkan in the first place? It's not like he needs us to serve him in some way like that. What is this even doing? Why is that even here? But I found an interesting sforno. At the very end of Parashat Mishpatim, the very last sforno, he brings in this idea that Parashat Terumah is not actually here in chronological order. That should be somewhere else. Specifically, he claims it should be after the episode of the golden calf. And if we fast forward a little bit to Parashat Kitisa, the very first pasuk of the second Aliyah, we see that Rashi agrees with him here. On Vayiten el Moshe, he comments, Ein mukdam u'me'ochar b'Torah, ma'aseh ha'egel kodem le'sivui malechet ha'mishkan yamim rabim. So we see that it's not in order. The story of the golden calf comes first. Okay, well, what are we supposed to learn from this? Sforno explains. He says that the whole idea of the Mishkan is a concession to man. Similar to what Rabbeinu Ramam says in the Moreh Nevuchim about the Korbanot. People back in the day were used to religious worship taking the place in temples. There were places that you could go, you would bring gifts to those deities. Those temples in the inside, there would be a statue, and worshipers would come and they would lay out food in front of the statue. They would literally dress the statue in clothes. But the covenant so far in this reading didn't include any of that. Any of the stuff that the Jewish people were used to, based on the whole world that surrounded them. Now, why is this significant? I think this is significant because we talked about how the Jewish people entered a Berit, the covenant. And what is a covenant? It means that two people generally come together, they enter into an agreement, and they each have duties, obligations, responsibilities to the other. But it also means that they negotiated those things, that each side was heard, and they came to an arrangement in which both parties to the pact were happy. Now, if we take this idea of Sforno and Rashi here seriously about the statement, then it really shows us that what we learn from Parashat Terumah is that that is what happened for us too. That we actually have a Berit with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That when our need of a Mishkan was made apparent, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu altered the Torah, so to speak, to include a provision for it. Of course, there are limits to it, and our temple is not quite like the temples of the others. In fact, we read at the very beginning of our Parasha, Ve'asuli Mikdash, make for me a Mikdash, kichol asher ani mareot lecha. Exactly as I show you. Because we don't want our Mishkan to be the same as the temples of the idolaters, because we need to learn different lessons from them. So for us, we learn about the showbread and the altar. And where are those placed in our Parsha? We learn that they are to be placed outside of the Holy of Holies, which is different from the placement of the pagan temple that we talked about. In the pagan temple, you would bring it to the idol. We don't even have an idol. We have the Torah in the center of our temple. So what we see from that placement is that the showbread is not really there for Hashem. He doesn't need it. It's not even in the Holy of Holies. The same is true of the korbanot. They're in the courtyard. They're outside. They're there for our sensibilities, for our needs. So under this reading, we really see that Parashat Terumah teaches us that we actually do have a berit with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And I hope that as we learn more about the Mishkan and the following parashiyot, that we can take that seriously and appreciate that fact. Shabbat Shalom.